It's like having an animal, but it isn't just glass. When everything you do affects how that piece of glass is going to behave, then it feels as if it has its own personality. So we live in a small hamlet just outside Hawkshead. If I walk from here to Hawkshead, I can see the Lake District hills, colours, textures that are very much part of the Lake District. And I was looking for something extra to bring, as well as the colour on the stems, to bring into my glasswork. You get these tree trunks that are sat in the ground, and they're covered in different lichens and mosses, and there's just this fabulous little mini world of texture and things going on. I just wanted to bring that in to what I was making. I started looking at ways that I could put that kind of texture and detail into what I make in the studio. That's how I started making these textured moulds, so that the texture of the plants would translate through into the blown final piece. And that's amazing, because when you blow that piece of glass into the textured mould, you suddenly see the texture being taken up by the glass, and this is slightly glowing, and you've got the texture coming in. It's magic. And so it's always a fresh challenge, always a different conversation being had. And how can you get bored?